Hello there, and welcome to the re-uploaded second episode of our Interview with the Expert series. We have a very talented historical writer joining us today. He is most well known for his book The August Gales, which won the 2014 Atlantic Book Award for historical writing. Today he has kindly offered to read us a section of his latest book, As British as the King. Please allow me to introduce you to Gerald Hallowell.
There are many topics that I could pick from the book, but I've decided to talk about fishermen in wartime. Now, during the First World War, there was one important way in which the fishermen of Lunenburg County had a good war. They prospered. According to the Canadian Fisherman, which was the journal of the fishing industry, trips to the banks in 1917 by 97 vessels and almost 1,900 men resulted in the largest catch in the history of the fleet. At the same time, prices for fish rose to new heights. 1918, claimed the Progress Enterprise of Lunenburg, was the most profitable year since the inception of the fleet. The total catch that year was valued at $3.5 million, which of course is quite a lot of money for that period. One of the reasons for this was that there had been less competition from European fishermen because of the war. And there was a program to sell fish to feed the soldiers, and they also encouraged civilians to eat fish so that there would be more meat available for the troops. Fishing, of course, was the major industry in Lunenburg, and it's notable that the first fisherman's picnic in Lunenburg took place during the war in the fall of 1916. Nevertheless, all was far from rosy in the fishermen's world. As the war progressed and casualties mounted, fishermen were increasingly being urged to enlist in the army, and eventually they were conscripted into the army. It had been expected that as producers of food, like farmers, the fishermen would be exempted from the draft. The man who stayed at home and produced food that was so necessary at the time was surely doing his duty to the empire as much as the men in the trenches. As journalist Agnes McGuire wrote, "Fishing was no work for weaklings, nor can women do it. The men simply could not be replaced on the schooners." William Duff, who was mayor of Lunenburg at the time and the local member of parliament, observed in the House of Commons that fishing and shipbuilding could not be done by old men and boys. And he strongly objected to suggestions that fishermen who did not join up were shirking. I think the members of this House will agree with me that men who leave their homes on the 15th of March, when ice is on the coast and the March winds and gales are blowing, and go out and anchor 150 miles from land, and every morning at daylight start off in the dories and haul their trawls, and continue that occupation for perhaps a month before they see land again. Men who pursue that occupation all through the summer fogs and during the August and September gales before returning home cannot be called slackers or cowards. In June 1918, a near riot occurred on the Lunenburg waterfront as fishermen of the town and the nearby village of Blue Rocks resisted the draft. It's not surprising that some of the men felt betrayed. Farmers' sons had been assured, wrongly as it turned out, that they would be exempt because they were needed on the farms. Likewise for the fishermen. During the controversial Canadian election of 1917, the Bridgewater Bulletin, in a last-minute, rather dishonest attempt to sway voters, assured its readers that the Prime Minister himself, Sir Robert Borden, had stated that all men engaged in fishing would be exempt from military service. It wasn't a lie, but it was certainly next thing to it. Excuse me. Harangued on land to join up, at sea the fishermen faced a more ferocious enemy, the German submarines. With the convoy system in place by mid-1917, largely protecting the merchant vessels, the U-boats turned their attention to the isolated fishing schooners, and in the end they sank about 11 from the county. The crew was placed in dories, often with little in the way of supplies, and they were forced to row a long way to shore. The vessels were bombed and sunk. The lives of the men were saved, but as one fisherman declared in Peter Barce's A Portrait of Lunenburg County, "But it wasn't so nice, you know, to lose all your clothes and all that fish and everything gone to the bottom. Nothing to live on, nothing." And that's how it went, fishing during the war. The times were indeed hard. There were rumors of spies in the land, and at night the lights of the town were blacked out. Once again, in September 1918, as the war was drawing to a close, William Duff praised the fishermen at war, portraying them as brave and fearless heroes. "A race of men who go down to the sea in ships and do business on the great waters, in spite of the submarine menace. A breed of manly men who left the ports of Lunenburg and La Havre during the past 60 days, when they were warned against submarines, to carry the merchandise of this country to foreign lands. Hearts of oak, some 3,000 of them, who left this county in March last in their 100-ton boats to pursue their avocation amid the storms, fogs, and perils of the Atlantic. Vikings, who departed from their homes to do their bit by producing food, knowing full well the submarine might show her nose across their bow at any time during the trip and send them to a watery grave." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerry, for sharing your time with us at the Knaut Rhuland House. As a bit of a bonus, Gerry was kind enough to send us another reading of his book after we finished filming together. So please sit back, and I hope you enjoy the bonus content.
Hello, I'm Gerald, often called Gerry. The title of my book is As British as the King, Lunenburg County During the First World War. And it has been shortlisted for the Democracy 250 Atlantic Book Award for Historical Writing. Activities on the home front during the war are recounted. The recruiting of men for the army, women raising funds for various charitable and patriotic organizations, and their struggle for the right to vote, bootleggers, politicians, spies, and Lunenburg fishing schooners being sunk by the U-boats, the German submarines. An event early in the war reveals the initial enthusiasm for the war effort, as well as some unintended humor, and that is where I shall be reading. Especially in the early years of the war, patriotic concerts were held around the county to raise funds for various causes. A concert in Lunenburg on November the 11th, 1914, to raise money for the Red Cross, deserves to be covered in some detail because it was typical, if grander than most, but also because of the delightfully entertaining and unrelenting critique offered by the reporter from the Progress Enterprise. Clearly, this reporter was not overly impressed. Held in the crowded opera house, it was alleged that the concert revealed the patriotic spirit of the inhabitants of Lunenburg. The entertainment had been arranged by the teachers of the academy, the local high school. The opening number was Gounod's Soldiers' Chorus, rendered by a choir of picked voices and conducted by W.A. Wynot, choirmaster of the Methodist Church. "It would have been faultless if the bass had been heavier," commented the reporter dryly. Arthur Hurtle's solo for King and Country was splendid for the occasion, but it did not seem to suit Mr. Hurtle, or else the singer was not in good form. Next was a tableau with the subject Home from the War, with Miss Ava Rayfuse in the role of the mother, reading a letter from her son, who came in the door in the person of C.E. Miller to loud applause. A duet for cornet and euphonium followed. The selection was very pleasing, but it would have been better if proper accompaniment had been present. Miss Isabel McGregor's recitation, Under Two Flags, was decidedly well done and was an appropriate number, but a little more animation would have added considerable to the latter part of the reading, which lends itself admirably to the elocutionist's art. During the intermission, the orchestra played their worst. In fact, in places during the march, they didn't play at all. Whether by accident or intent, we know not. Why Mr. Penn Spicer chose the one piece they could not play for such an important place as the interval will remain a mystery. After the intermission came the drill, the Allied Nations. This number was practically perfect, one of the prettiest, intricate performances ever offered the Lunenburg theatre-going public. But, the reporter remarked, never passing up a chance to damn with faint praise, had the chorus work been attacked with greater surety, it would have ranked as a masterpiece. The drill was followed by an extravaganza called A Sailor's Life, performed by Penn Spicer, the only humorous number in the program, so there was much applause. With his free and easy stage manner, Mr. Spicer was always a favorite with a Lunenburg audience. Another tableau followed, and then Mrs. Hobbs, an artiste of the first water, received a great reception for her Angus MacDonald. Regrettably, and not surprisingly, the concluding vocal number, a quartet entitled Sweet and Low, was not a success, as the balance was not good, the soprano being overpowered and the pitch kept falling, which cannot be tolerated in quartet work with any good result. Britannia was the title of the last tableau, with the leading figure supported by men representing the Navy and the Army. The colonies and allied nations were grouped about the pedestal at the feet of Britannia, representing Canada, Australia, India, South Africa, Ireland, Scotland, France, Belgium, Japan, and Russia. The sum of $159 for the Red Cross was realized at the door, thanks to the kind patriotic efforts of the Academy teachers and their friends. The Canadian Red Cross was one of the most important of the charitable organizations during the war. Every village and hamlet in the county eventually had Red Cross workers who contributed a steady stream of supplies. As early as the first Christmas of the war, the Lunenburg Red Cross was busy preparing boxes of gifts for the town's boys at the front. Many inexpensive trifles, the Bridgewater Bulletin of December the 1st advised, could be sent. Small packages of smokers' articles, candy, shaving and toilet soap, indelible pencils, leather bootlaces, chewing gum, boracic acid, and carbolated Vaseline would be most acceptable. Among the more unusual items the Red Cross dispatched overseas were cholera belts, nightingales, which were a shoulder shawl worn in hospitals, housewives, which were portable sewing kits, and court plasters. The New Germany column in the Progress Enterprise of May the 3rd, 1916, reported that many items had been shipped to Red Cross headquarters in Halifax. Mrs. Willie Feindl had knit upwards of 40 pairs of socks since the organization had started there. Mrs. Feindl was surpassed in her efforts, however, by Mrs. Edward Zwicker, an aged lady also from New Germany, who had passed her 79th milestone on life's journey, and had done her bit for the boys in the trenches by knitting 210 pairs of socks, all forwarded to them through the proper channels. In the eyes of the all-wise Creator, and in the hearts of the nation, suggested the bulletin on March the 26th, Mrs. Zwicker should take no second place to Lady Borden and Lady Foster, wives of the Prime Minister and one of his prominent cabinet ministers. According to historians Sarah Glassford and Amy Shaw, in A Sisterhood of Suffering and Service, the knitting woman, especially the knitting mother, exemplified a societally approved means of fulfilling a female citizen's wartime obligations, and became a powerful and enduring icon of an engaged home front. On December the 20th, 1916, a rather unkind little poem, supposedly written by one of the soldiers on active service, appeared in the Progress Enterprise. Received your socks, lady, some fit. Used one for a hammock, one for a mitt. Like to meet you, lady, when I've done my bit. In the meantime, lady, where in hell did you learn to knit? That's it for now. Best wishes.
Before I say anything, I would like to give a big thank you to Gerald Hallowell for allowing the privilege of making a video about his new book, As British as the King. That being said, if this piqued your interest, I hope that you consider buying and reading through Gerry's books. I've put up a few links in the description of this video that will help you find where to buy them. Anyhow, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Knaut Rhuland House Online, and have a wonderful day. Take care and see you in the next episode.